Hello! In this video, I will explain the sociological clash, the rumor of clash, between science and spirituality, where by spirituality I mean the metaphysical statement of the immateriality of consciousness, which implies the existence of afterlife, as opposed to physicalism. I will also explain the way out of this clash, though, of course, anyone remains free to ignore the solution and stay stuck in the problem if one wishes. But first, who cares about this, and why? And why do I care about it myself? My first motivation was intellectual curiosity. As two genuine insights to different aspects of reality, science and spirituality should naturally fit into a common picture and not contradict each other, so it feels terrible to hear otherwise. But this is now past for me, since I studied and clarified the relevant issues in the foundations of math and physics. The rumor of clash is just a sociological and historical accident. And so, its explanation will also involve some sociology. Let me tell a bit about my life. During my adolescence, aside my main passion for math, I was also fascinated by near-death experiences, which naturally appeared as genuine experiences of consciousness outside the body, both by their contents and for metaphysical reasons, that consciousness belongs to a different ontological category than computations by physical systems that would just switch off at death. So the claim there were mere illusions, as found in scientific popularization magazines, was to me shocking nonsense. For a while, this presumed clash between science and the intuition of afterlife led me to distrust the sanity of rational thinking itself, in the name of which this nonsense was proclaimed. That is how I got seduced by evangelical Christianity, which seemed a great witness of the inability of reason to discern the nature of reality. Then for years I was a kind of Christian scientist. So yes, it is possible to be both Christian and a scientist, and for a while it felt much more coherent at least than being the kind of scientist which scientific popularization media were offering. But then I painfully experienced how Christianity is really at odds with reason, how this clash between science and religion is really the fault of religion which is so far from the truth, and how vital rational thinking skills are to sort things out and reach a decent understanding of life with its multiple dimensions of complexity and paradoxes. That is why my second motivation, which may be my personal bias, is to save the honor of science itself in the eyes of some people as I was, misled to seek an escape from reason and science towards religion and irrationality for the sake of one's senses, by scientific popularization media which powerfully discredit the cause of science they claim to defend by claiming nonsense in its name. But my third and ultimate motivation is fun. This so-called clash of science and spirituality turns out to be a ridiculous problem, as it takes a lot of fun to sort it out. This news can be felt as an insult for some people with a kind of vital need to see this problem as one of the most serious ones in the world. I am deeply sorry for them, and I'd even naturally wish myself to go that way, but I must cope with the way it is. I also painfully experienced the drama of having to switch worldviews, so I know what a shock it can be. Let me just remind them how much different sides of the debate of science and religion are already ridiculous insults to each other. As theoretical positions, even if participants care to not mean it personally. So I wonder how anyone can just wake up now and complain that someone's view seems insulting to theirs, as if this situation never happened before. And the position I defend, which is a scientism without physicalism, is somehow in the middle between usual extremes. I know there is an opposite position, that is physicalism without scientism. But anyway. Remember, it is a debate hardly anyone cares about. And that is all right, because life is a great adventure with an open-ended range of other problems. And when too many people have the bad idea of caring about the same problem, traffic jams follow. Most participants are non-scientists wishing to promote spirituality. They often see the physicalism of science as a kind of tragedy where it would be kind of urgent to reunite science with spirituality to save the world. They also often voice my former feeling, blaming the scientific mindset for its presumed blindness to metaphysics. I will assume to be talking to them here. Now I have a first question for you. Which problem exactly do you wish to see resolved, and whose resolution you expect to change the world? If someone thinks the problem is how to switch the world's majority into a belief in afterlife, then I wonder on which planet that person is living. Because on my planet, it seems that afterlife believers were always a majority. I even see some non-believers with very good reasons to wish more people to switch to their side. Do you expect science to suddenly go much better if only scientists let go of their limiting physicalistic beliefs? But what about the fact that metaphysics is irrelevant to the bulk of scientific research done by melting pots of believers and non-believers whose metaphysical disagreements are out of topic in their work? Or do you expect that understanding the details of mind-matter interaction would have a much greater impact than just accepting its existence? But who can make an amazing effective use of this understanding? Long ago, discovering Maxwell's equations changed the world, not because everybody got amazed at these beautiful equations, but because they could be used to design radio communication devices. More recently, when physicists verified the existence of the Higgs boson, it helped to sell lots of newspapers reporting that this boson was nicknamed the God particle, though it was just a joke. Yet it did not change the world, because only a few people can happily understand the topic, while other people remain unaffected by lack of application. What else? Alright, there could be some progress in medicine, fewer risks for near-death experiencers to be sent to psychiatric hospitals, and some more criminal cases could get resolved thanks to mediums. But all such stakes still seem to me just a small fraction of the world's problems and needed solutions. So, spiritualists are divided between a minority who believe that connecting science and spirituality would be a wonderful revolution, and a majority who rather let anyone freely go their respective ways and specializations, independently of each other. But they don't seem to care about this ideological division. Did you ever wonder why? Of course, the latter majority is not likely to care. But what about the former minority then? You can find them producing and following articles after articles, videos after videos, where they keep dreaming and prophesying about a future union of science and spirituality, how wonderful it would be and how much we should work towards that goal. They are the voice of spirituality, yearning towards science, but also complaining against it, yelling at it, I love you, but I hate you for not loving me in return. They form a strong little circle of passionates, preaching to each other this conviction, which must be true by lack of any opponent, except of course for their favorite ones on the side of skepticism. Spiritualists who don't care don't matter, because they don't reply, and they should stay ignored indeed, to avoid a terrible brotherly fight. Now, how else are those few concerned spiritualists working towards their dream to connect themselves with modern science? Did they undertake to develop popular physics universities, scientific clubs, websites, or any social networks to initiate each other to tensor calculus, general relativity, or quantum field theory? Did they also start advertising this understanding of modern physics as a fantastic form of spiritual adventure, an intimate link with the creator of this universe? What? Did they forget about all this? Let me insist on what they are losing here. Usual spiritualist views describe reality as roughly split in two levels: a lower level of material things explored by science, and a higher level of consciousness and spiritual realities. In that picture, people who get the chance to move their senses, their consciousness level, or just their interest, from so-called material things to spiritual ones by meditation, out-of-body experiences, or whatever else, are having an amazingly greater and deeper view of reality transcending our usual life experience. This may be qualified in such terms as leaving the matrix or Plato's cave allegory. Now, without disagreeing with this picture, I must point out other facts which happen to be crucial for this discussion. On the one hand, scientists may be mistaken indeed when they come to deny the immateriality of consciousness and the transcendence of spiritual experiences. But this is only a mistake when this question is effectively the point of their work, which is usually not the case. And why should it? Why should a majority of scientists feel concerned? We were living before this life in spiritual realities where we will come back later. And there we decided that it would be a great idea to forget all about it for a while, to come here and undertake this human adventure with its countless other worthy possible explorations. Many of us precisely signed up to forget spiritual stuff even more completely than others, to better avoid distraction from there. And here we are in the right condition to fully play the game of human life. Where is the mistake, please? This is no significant mistake after all. On the other hand, a mirror image of that mistake is also committed by those spiritualists who vastly underestimate the intellectual adventures of high-level mathematics and physics, which also transcend ordinary human experience, forming a genuine escape from this cave in a different but no less deep and valuable dimension than spiritual experiences. That is the mistake of ignoring, when it matters, how much science can be such a vast, deep, solid and amazing form of knowledge that it cannot stand comparison with the kind of random fanciful speculations which prevail in some other circles, including philosophy. I know, this claim may sound just as hubristic and delusional to some people as the reality of the supernatural sounds to other people. And similarly, I have no proof to offer to the non-initiated. But anyway, it's not my personal fancy. It's a general consensus of scientists since a long time. Most physicists hardly give more credibility to philosophers, and even to philosophers of physics, than to theologians. You may check this, occasionally reported by scientists, in response to philosophers who visibly have themselves much more time and energy to waste ridiculously claiming to be on the same or even higher rationality level as scientists when they clearly aren't. It may be hard to grasp this contrast between science and philosophy without experiencing it oneself. As a mathematician familiar with general relativity, quantum field theory, algebraic topology, and insights into the foundations of mathematics, including the undecidability of the continuum hypothesis, when I see the writings and speculations of philosophers or spiritual blogs and channels around, they usually appear too futile and childish for my interest. I mean, even worse than many works in concrete fields which are not usually qualified as intellectual. And this has an explanation, that is, concrete fields have reality feedback mechanisms which enforce relevance, meaningfulness, and correctness, which philosophy hasn't. Especially when philosophers aren't even interested to compare their speculations with the already uncovered facts. I mean, when philosophers of antiquity were speculating about the nature and structure of matter, it could seem out of reach of investigation. This was no tragedy, only a lot of jobs ahead for physicists to solve the problem. But when philosophers keep speculating about the same problem just as cluelessly still nowadays, this is comedy. I may rather be interested in a book that a philosopher wrote long after his death, or by an explorer of still much deeper spiritual realities, like this Seth who ended his reincarnation cycle long before sending down here his writings, which just feel home to me. So, spiritualists trying to link themselves with science produce blogs and videos where they say, "Hey, let's invite for a talk this great philosopher who has some super ideas to suggest about the nature of reality and how mind and matter may be connected." Never mind that he neither started learning modern physics, nor got familiar with NDEs or other parapsychological phenomena. Also never mind that his ideas are so vague that nobody can be sure what they really imply and whether this or that possible detail may fit there or not. What he did is He just tried once more to explain the same everyday reality experience with the same intellectual background which were already available to antiquity philosophers. But this new try must be very interesting given his academic titles in philosophy, the number of books he sold, and his courage to question the physicalistic orthodoxy prevailing among his academic peers, who, despite having the same titles, must be less great since they failed to question physicalism in such a way. So, what does he have to tell us? He is going to explain how bold he is to try questioning the materialistic dogmas and how much his ideas are great and would deserve a big deal of attention and study by scientists, but how they are rejecting, censoring and ignoring these ideas for no good reason because of their materialistic prejudices. So he is calling for your help to the cause of unifying science and spirituality by making a lot of noise for him, spreading the news about him, and inviting him to many more blogs and media around. So, thank you very much for your care and see you next month. 1 month later, what's the news? We are now inviting another philosopher developing other speculative ideas for the unification of science and spirituality. They would also deserve a lot of attention from the physics community, but he is unfairly ignored as well. So, please make a lot of noise for him too. Another time. This time we are inviting a great physicist with still completely different ideas about metaphysics and the link between mind and body. He got a great position in our scientific institutions for his work in computer simulations. Never mind that he never started learning quantum mechanics. We must call him a physicist anyway to persuade you that he is really a great guy to listen to, and that his view about physics is not a joke, but really deserves the interest of physicists around. So it's so unfair that they still always mocked him. And we can safely hide our responsibility in our praise to his work, behind both his academic titles and all the hundreds of other spirituality blogs and channels that already called him a physicist before. Next times, we shall still invite more and more guests, with still completely different brilliant suggestions about the possible nature of reality, which all deserve a lot of attention. Let's sum up. It was such a pity when we had 2 separate insights into reality. A very successfully confirmed scientific picture of matter, and a certain galaxy of hints about consciousness, including introspection and some psychological and parapsychological literature. This was too much, especially our one clear and reliable scientific insight into matter is too much in itself for us to bother effectively studying it. Then, we were feeling a bit better to hear one random speculative candidate global picture gathering both sides. Now, we are so much happier to see a dozen of such suggestions of what the global picture might look like, to see these suggestions having no link with each other, and to be feeling completely helpless to tell which of them may have some truth in it, if any. Because that is how we are so nicely letting every one of our listeners completely free to form their own opinion about it. Now, is that so good? And are we done? Not exactly, because what we really wanted was to change the mind of scientists. Unless, of course, all we really wanted was to feel proud of having done our job of reporting these ideas and telling each other how great they must be so that they really deserve the attention of scientists, who should review all these ideas, get seduced by some if only they have an open mind, and work on completing all the necessary details we were too lazy to care for ourselves, so we can confidently blame their closed-mindedness if they don't. I mean, that is just on the shoulders of physicalist scientists who care. The respective authors of all our candidate unified views have, of course, no such duty towards each other. But which kind of scientists do we need to convince? Scientists in different fields may conceive the scientific grounds for physicalism differently. One may be tempted to refer to neurobiologists, assumed to be best placed to scientifically approach consciousness. However, This choice of reference in emerging stuff away from the foundations of physics somehow presumes physicalism and is thus questionable as a basis for debate. Neurobiologists usually defend physicalism, saying quantum effects in the brain are too small to play any role, especially compared with the larger effect of thermal noise, which is a mere expression of deterministic randomness accounted for by classical mechanics and thus not a possible place for the action of free will. They justify this metaphysical status of thermal noise by reference to the common view of thermodynamics among philosophers of physics, ignoring that philosophers of physics are not the voice of science. What are these philosophers supposed to represent, other than obsolete echoes of 19th century science? They may even ignore how determinism and randomness may contradict each other. Now, this old conception of thermal noise got refuted by a famous physicist in published articles expressing the clear consensus of theoretical physics. Namely, thermal fluctuations undergo quantum superpositions and so remain metaphysically contained in quantum randomness. The similarity of thermal noise with its old classical model is a good approximation for usual engineering purposes, but it ignores the metaphysics. Now, the metaphysics happens to matter in this precise discussion with the effective consequences which invalidate this approximation for the brain's behavior, as I will explain at the end of this video. Now, this devastating blow to the argument remains shamefully ignored not only by philosophers, but also by all spiritualist media, claiming to be in desperate search for the best scientific arguments on their side. Do you know why? Because its author is a physicalist. Of course, just accusing scientists of closed-mindedness is not useful. We need to look nice to reduce the risk of being rejected. Now, if you have no idea how physicalists think, and you wonder what may best shake their position, which explanation can you invent? Since you cannot invent a better explanation for their view than closed-mindedness, and you also bet they may be partly right, but you have no idea how, you will guess that your best chance of seducing them is to offer a view which looks as friendly as possible to their current beliefs. Let's call this playing chameleon with them. For example, since some physicalists developed a tentative account of consciousness called integrated information theory, some spiritualists came up with spiritualist theses accepting it in their own picture. But this probably never had any success among scientists. Because, first, we need to build over the well-established facts of science, not over some random speculations of a few physicalists. Both should not be confused. Second, a view that mixes ingredients from different theses is likely to be incoherent, and so to look bad for people with an acute sense of logical consistency. As another example, some people fear that an idealistic view would repel physicalists, and fancy panpsychism as a more friendly option. The idea is to combine the physicalist acceptance of physical objects as real ones with the spiritualist view of consciousness as the ground of all being, to form the thesis that all physical objects must be conscious. Precisely, panpsychism recognizes all electrons and other particles as conscious entities, assuming the thesis of scientific realism, very popular among philosophers of science, which grants objective existence to all entities appearing in the expression of our best scientific theories. Actually, physicists prefer logical positivism over scientific realism because our best physics cannot grant to any of its terms a real existence similar to our familiar experience of physical existence. But philosophers of science keep seeing scientific realism as a standard of science, regardless what science discovered it must look like, in virtue of their old tradition of playing chameleon with scientists and always failing this way to gain any credibility in scientists' eyes, but never learning from this failure or even acknowledging it, since the credibility they earn from peer philosophers sufficed to sustain their career. Now, the fashion of playing chameleon with physicalists seems to remain popular among spiritualists for the same reason. This attraction of doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. To someone praising this advantage of panpsychism over idealism, I once asked about reincarnation testimonies. He admitted they should be real, but bad to point out because reincarnated children cannot serve as the beautiful chameleons we need to seduce physicalists. I asked, if you see panpsychism as a great explanation of the nature of reality, how great do you see it as an explanation of reincarnation testimonies, and did you try to share it among reincarnation researchers? What a ridiculous question, I dared asking. Of course, spiritualist pictures of reality have no need to account for any spiritual reality, still not officially recognized by science. There is no point to play chameleon with reincarnation researchers who are already spiritualists. We need to focus on playing chameleon with physicalists only, trying our best to invent some great new attempt of a better explanation for only the same old material reality, which science already perfectly explained with a success we can't ever dream to compete with anyway. Problem. If panpsychism is not good for reincarnation researchers, then how can it be good enough for physicists? How do you expect physicists to take seriously a view you don't even care making coherent and widely held on your own side? You know what? I have a much better plan to spiritualize the world. We don't need to debate physicists, because there are too few people and nobody cares about what they think anyway. The world is driven by businessmen and economists, now stuck in a terribly materialistic worldview. So many troubles come from the tolerance of inequalities and unfair transactions by business people, who think that money doesn't smell. They are the people we need to play chameleon with, offering them some fresh spiritual ideas to spiritualize our world in practice. Here is a special variant of panpsychism just for them. The idea is to apply scientific realism to the case of economical science. You know, we cannot explain the world without the concept of dollars and other monetary units staying in bank accounts and moving from one account to another. Now, in the name of scientific realism, we have to conclude that there must really exist such things as dollars and other currency units staying in bank accounts. Then, to switch from a materialistic paradigm to a spiritual one which identifies consciousness as the ground of all being, we need to recognize every dollar in a bank account as a conscious individual in its own right. This is the thesis of monetary panpsychism. Don't you see what a great view this is? It offers not only a deeper explanation we were missing all along of why the concept of dollars in bank accounts is so indispensable to describe the world, but also a wonderful reason to put the shame on unfair business practices by regarding them as forms of kidnapping. What? It still doesn't look good? I know the world is so much rooted in materialistic dogmas that it takes a lot of boldness and open-mindedness to question these and explore some new paradigm. What? You believe that your rejection of monetary panpsychism can really come from valid reasons from economic studies, not just from closed-mindedness and materialistic prejudices. But why should I care about your opinion? Why are you laughing? Hey, just a question. If you believe the rejection of panpsychism by physicists must be due to materialistic prejudices and closed-mindedness more than valid reasons you're missing, did you at least care to ask them if they agree with this accusation before you get confident enough to make public speeches which implicitly mean it? And if you happen to hear their disagreement by accident anyway, could you at least start taking them seriously? So, why are you now mocking an attitude you were practicing yourself? What? Why do you think the plausibilities of both versions of panpsychism clearly differ? If you say your familiarity with economics leads you to some conclusions for it, which you couldn't draw for physics, but you aren't familiar with physics, then how can you say the difference is an objective one? What? $1 is divisible into 100 cents. Alright, so its consciousness emerges from those of all the 100 cents it is made of. What's the problem? Okay, it is not always clear how many dollars there are, where they are located, whether they were converted into another currency, and their amount may vary continuously like quantities instead of discrete units. But none of this is a difference, since all the same holds for particles due to renormalization. What? I'm talking about renormalization, you know. How is that you don't know about renormalization? But how do you expect to have a meaningful discussion about physics, then? Now, metaphysics may be scientifically debated on empirical grounds with data from parapsychology, but a debate on theoretical grounds should take theoretical physics seriously. Because theoretical physics is anyway the ultimate foundation of the current scientific picture of the world, and this is exactly the part of science at stake when discussing the ultimate nature of reality. Once again, not everybody needs to be interested in physics. But I feel puzzled to see the debating time of scientists wasted by spiritualists who cannot even stop contradicting themselves on whether they have any interest for science or not. And in lack of clue about the form of matter beyond naive appearances, the chances are poor to understand the link between mind and matter better. And yet, if you really wish to debate metaphysics with physicists, with better chances to shake their physicalism than to look like a clown in front of them. But you can admit this is unlikely to work, either by trying to invent the way out of the blue, knowing nothing about modern physics and the viewpoint of physicists, nor even by exchanging speculations on this with peers just as clueless about this as you are. Then, I have great news for you. There really is a better way, which I'm even going to reveal now, step by step. The first amazing news is that you can discover why some physicists remain physicalists by effectively watching a debate and listening there to the physicist doing his best to explain the grounds of his physicalism, why he resists some famous philosophical arguments, and which questions you need to address for the debate to go forward. This explanation starts with a report that the well-verified laws of physics have an amazing kind of logical structure, as follows. It would be a huge mistake to portray them as a patchwork of arbitrary processes and hypotheses which could be easily changed to produce any kind of different behavior, like an algorithm could be changed by inserting lines of code to modify any variable under arbitrary conditions. These laws have a kind of crystal perfection, an extreme necessity to themselves, like a cathedral which could not be any different than it is, as any change, which non-experts might like to fancy, would mathematically induce a collapse of the whole. It would destroy the very intelligibility of the amazing success of modern physics. That is why he doesn't see these laws as offering any room for a non-physical mind to exert free will in a brain. So, modern physics can be pictured as a perspective from inside a closed room, while consciousness belongs to the next room behind a locked door. Usual spiritualist arguments are ways of shouting or banging at the door, and arguing from the way it sounds that consciousness seems to be staying behind. This is rather futile for two reasons. First, physicists could already bang like this themselves to notice how it sounds without your help. Second, for a scientist, there is no sense just wondering whether the correct reality picture should include a spiritual side or not, because it needs an explanation of what it is supposed to mean, to clarify the candidate picture in some crucial, clear and coherent details. So, the challenge for spiritualists is to specify whether there should exist a key opening this door between both reality sides to let an immaterial mind act on matter, and what this key may look like. How strange it is to see a spiritualist dismissing this challenge by claiming to defend a family of views which answer it differently. Let me explain. This is an argument against the existence of a defensible spiritualist view by dividing the range of such hypothetical views in different kinds, then arguing that one kind of view looks absurd for one reason, and the other kind also looks absurd for another reason. Against this line of argument, three strategies may be considered. One is to try seriously defending the existence and plausibility of a candidate view of the first kind, answering the objections to it. Another is to do the same for the second kind. The last way is to seriously explain why it was a false dichotomy, and so how to conceive a possible view which does not fall into either case, and this way escape all objections. But what can be the sense of trying to defend a family of views by different authors which answer the challenge differently? Far from resolving the given challenge, this only multiplies its difficulty. Indeed, it amounts to the conjunction of all the following claims, therefore either putting on one's shoulder the burden of fully justifying all of them one by one, or making a fool of oneself for failing to fulfill this self-inflicted duty. The claim of existence of some fully defensible thesis answering the challenge in one way, the similar claim answering it another way. The claim that both kinds of solutions keep a sufficient dose of similarity, a sufficient agreement on how they differ from some other views, to let them deserve being gathered under a common label. By the way, what a strange feature it would be for the shape of reality to allow some very different reality picture to be conceived which looks about as plausible as the correct one. Why would anyone expect this? And how may arguments for the plausibility of a false view positively assist that of the correct one? That sounds like a challenge to the law of non-contradiction, a terrible perspective for a scientist. So you see, this physicist was so nice to explain the rules of the game, the conditions for ideas and arguments to look scientifically respectable. He only forgot to conclude by giving you the already cooked answer strategy you need for winning against him by these rules. Please understand, if he had been too clearly aware what a losing side he had picked, he could also have questioned himself and switched sides without your help. But the second amazing news is that you can start discovering your winning strategy, first by checking the article written for this purpose, but even better, by watching the same physicist in another metaphysical debate, now with other physicists about the interpretations of measurement in quantum mechanics. Indeed, in their small group of friends, they seem more at ease to really share their view inspired by modern physics. The thing is, quantum mechanics is made of two very different laws. The main one, called the unitary dynamics, describes how systems evolve when not observed. But its result has the oddity of looking like a superposition of multiple possibilities in the eyes of observers. So the other law, called the collapse dynamics, is needed to convert the superposed states from the unitary dynamics into probabilistic predictions for measurement outcomes. Not only both laws play very different roles, they also differ in nature. Only the unitary dynamics is really a law, in the sense of being mathematically precise and deterministic in given fields of approximation. The collapse dynamics is very unclear. It cannot define when measurements take place, which states are definite measurement outcomes while others are superpositions of these, and it is mute about the source of choice of the so-called possible outcome that becomes actual while others don't. Indeed, of course, any explicit cause of choice for a random event would destroy its title of random event, and so destroy the status of probabilistic law for the collapse dynamics. And yet, by some amazing mathematical features of all this, like it really took a genius to invent laws for a universe like this, the predictions from the collapse dynamics are perfectly clear and independent of all its unspecified details, leaving no room for any experiment to detect and clarify them. To sum things up, physics is like a closed room made of the unitary dynamics, which is mathematically very solid and self-necessary. But on its side appears the collapse dynamics, like a door from which some noise seems to ring, especially when things get observed, but the precise condition escapes physical description. Then, physicists who care about metaphysics are debating which kind of reality may be underlying these strange appearances between several very different candidates. The many worlds interpretation only accepts the reality of the unitary dynamics, from which the collapse dynamics would emerge as an illusion. The other two main physicalist interpretations, Bohmian mechanics and objective collapse, admit some other real ingredient to actualize one measurement result. But, in lack of natural solution matching our best physics, they face a hopeless task of trying to fix any coherent mathematical details for that ingredient. This trouble is what usually pushes quantum field theorists to many worlds, as explained in this article whose argument is deeply similar with the previous one. So, why not unite both and reduce the defense of physicalism to that of many worlds? Strangely, this was not followed here, where the phrase core theory is claimed to include both dynamics. But, since only the unitary dynamics is well defined, what does it mean? There it is defined as all physicalist interpretations together. Indeed, you can admire a wonderful claim. Don't you see what this means? This is so nice of him. This shows how much he loves you. It means he understood how much you love to play chameleon with him. So, to make you happy, he undertook to play chameleon with you in return. He even plays it so well that he could beat you at it. He understood how impressed you could be to see the physicalist label defended by arbitrarily gathering under it a friendly union of widely different views with different answers on the existence and nature of any additional law beyond the unitary dynamics, but with no need of plausibility argument for each other than the sociological force of their popularities among philosophers of physics. A popularity so dispersed between different views because none of them can look more coherent than another. And he came so nicely to qualify this union of views as a coherent and attractive pack just for you. Because when he's with his friends, where you're not supposed to be looking, he admits something quite different. Namely, that it should be very embarrassing to physicists.
The winner, although nothing got a majority, but the plurality, 42% of the vote, was the Copenhagen interpretation.
42%?
42% believe it, and I suspect, now I'm going beyond saying true things and saying my personal opinion, which I happen to believe is true. I think it's just because people haven't thought about it very hard.
This was his comment on a poll among participants of a conference titled Quantum Physics and the Nature of Reality. But, that's not just him. This consensus of the few expert versions of physicalism is only the tip of a much wider consensus, spanning a large spectrum of views which all agree on physicalism like multiple religions agree on having faith. Indeed, religions easily classify people between those who have faith and those who don't, without recalling which doctrine this faith should support, as if there was obviously only one possible. They often ignore the issue of the popularity of different faiths, or cope with this by denying their authenticity, or ignoring the differences and seeing other faiths as nice approximations of their own. And this consensus of opposites is very useful to their collective persistence, by allowing every believer to go shopping for a version that looks best by lack of awareness of the troubles with that particular version. So, here are some non-expert physicalisms all united in this great sociological consensus, keeping the public image of science bound to physicalism. Some physicalists behave as if quantum physics never existed. This includes philosophers who keep writing books or articles about metaphysics or the philosophy of physics, without mentioning quantum physics except in footnotes or the like, and thus either based on classical mechanics or even disconnected from all known physics. Some others recognize its existence, but proudly claim there is nothing to infer from it, according to the famous quote that nobody understands quantum mechanics, taken as the ultimate word on the topic, to make a fool of whoever would dare claiming to have found any sense in it or drawn any lesson from it. This reminds me of religious preachers claiming to teach a word of God so much above all human intelligence that they feel proud of their own cluelessness about the meaning of their own teaching. Others see it urgent to start a crusade against quantum mechanics, calling to reject it for failing to be a scientific theory, and invent from scratch some more rational kind of physics. These are the new Galileo, courageous advocates of a new heterodoxy, daring to leave the beaten paths and question the prevailing dogmas of quantum mysticism, where physicists got hypnotized for decades by Bohr's foolish reply to Einstein or the like. They are still part of the scientific consensus, as they can rely on the scientific authority of some official teachers of quantum mechanics who proudly stole the job of humorists, unless it's the other way around, by their way of carefully designing their lectures to make them look like the most ridiculous caricature of themselves, educating the next generation of physicists towards a scientific orthodoxy of self-mockery. They are popularizers of physics who care so well to popularize the popularization of the popularization that they naturally simplify the message of quantum mechanics to make it look just as friendly to physicalism as the scientific consensus says it is. They often claim that decoherence solves the measurement problem by describing the wave function collapse. Indeed, decoherence is a key concept clarifying the empirical definiteness of quantum mechanics. However, it actually leaves the metaphysical interpretation unsolved. This reminds me of how neurologists successfully explain near-death experiences by naively reinventing the contents of these experiences in conformity to what they must naturally look like in order to fit the nice kind of hallucinations which the scientific consensus says they are. Then, so much of the arguments for physicalism proclaimed in science's name, including in peer-reviewed articles, consist in claiming that things must be going in some ways, like scientifically established and unquestionable facts, while this is not actually agreed on by all three main physicalist interpretations, when it fits any one of them at all. This is hard to avoid due to how unnatural it is to gather all physicalist interpretations under a common label. But such restrictions of validity of physicalist claims are usually ignored to avoid visibly weakening the case for physicalism in a way many people are not ready to acknowledge. Strangely, while different such physicalist arguments may appear, which are mutually exclusive in the range of versions of physicalism they can tolerate in the name of reason, I never saw such an argument being opposed by a supporter of a physicalist view which it excludes no less than it supposedly excludes the role of consciousness. These observations lead to the amazing news that a mission to reconnect science with spirituality first needs to make peace with the law of non-contradiction, and even take it as a powerful ally, by which much of the scientific consensus for physicalism could in principle be defeated, just like Christianity is debunked like this.
I get angry that I have to know more about their damn religion than they do. It's like, believers will say the most bizarre, inaccurate, fucked up shit about their own religion, about the tenets and texts of their religion, and I have to correct them on it, and I have to do the research on it. I mean, that night that I spent 6 hours combing through the Gospels, finding all the places where Jesus actually did talk about hell, because somebody was arguing in my blog, no, Jesus never mentioned hell, that's this made-up idea that they made up later. It's like, that's 6 hours of my life I am never getting back.
I admit such efforts may be futile in a world of disconnected popularization and divided science. But at least you may ignore the sociological noise to focus on debating experts who supposedly stand as references. I have been puzzled to see spiritualists trying to play chameleon with them by offering to endorse each physicalist interpretation alternatively and fancying ways to reinterpret these as possibly defensible versions of spiritualism. This strategy misses a crucial fact, that experts are usually driven to an interpretation of quantum mechanics by the same kind of motivation usually driving ordinary citizens to their choice of vote during elections. It's not that they like the candidate they vote for, but that they dislike all others more. So, a much better way to look nice in the eyes of all experts together, and even better than they see each other, would be to tell them, yes, you're all so right to dislike all the interpretations of quantum mechanics you came up with for the reasons you said. Then the next amazing news is that this way to look nice can even also look serious, if only it is really serious. That is, after actually studying all the arguments developed by experts in quantum foundations against each other's views. I gathered and developed some great ones in my own pages. When you're ready, you can debate with experts by returning to them their own famous challenge. Now the challenge of telling their preferred interpretation and trying to defend it against all objections. You can debate the details of the physicalist ontology and its deep troubles, made somehow more acute by quantum physics, but also independently explorable in purely philosophical terms. Big challenges are in the way for physicalism to try articulating physical ontology, conscious ontology, and mathematical ontology. You may have great fun challenging physicalists to state and defend their position all the way about nonsensical consequences of physicalism, such as Boltzmann brains, mind uploading, mind cloning, and the mathematical universe hypothesis. To explain whether or not a conscious individual is the same as a big file, whether the ontology of consciousness is reducible to that of purely mathematical objects, and how any physical reality can help structuring conscious existence in this case. Actually, the ontology of infinite mathematical objects is quite rich but hardly known beyond the circle of specialists in mathematical logic, which leaves little hope to find any physicalist debater with the competence to discuss it. But the trouble is even worse with finite mathematical objects to which physicalism seems to reduce consciousness by lack of conceivable non-trivial ontology for them. Finally, physicalists may give up trying to make sense of their own view, but still keep it by blaming their opponents for not being clearer. This is the problem indeed. Why is the debate space full of spiritualists who seem so confused? How could they be so brainwashed by the presumption that mainstream science is physicalist and the right spiritualist picture remains out of reach of current science, that they keep desperately searching for it where it has the least chances to be? In endlessly twisted, random speculations, far away from the well-established facts of science. Why do they see so much more glory in inventing new fancies than in learning clear facts? Do they just need to never see their favorite problem resolved for fear of losing their job? Because the last amazing news is that the link of physics with spirituality is already clear and natural, and should appear as such to anyone with the relevant background. This background includes quantum physics and the debate on its interpretations, which may help warning you against all the defects of physicalist interpretations, which a good spiritualist view would better not reiterate. Indeed, the clear facts of science remain our friends to understand the nature of reality, since the universe had no reason to conspire against our investigative efforts. This means scientific realism is not so wrong, only inaccurate. Namely, the non-physical side of reality naturally escapes physical description, but it is also natural for both sides to fit each other, so that the metaphysics can be inferred from the physics, like Cinderella can be found from her slipper. Here, the metaphysics doesn't mean everything about consciousness, of course, which is impossible, but the key principles ruling the links between mind and matter. You know how to find Cinderella, don't you? First, you need her slipper, which means to actually learn some relevant physics. Then, you need to invite all candidates and effectively check for each of them if it fits. And if it doesn't fit well, there is no point trying to force it. Because there is no reason why the true Cinderella would not feel comfortable with it. It only means you didn't invite her yet. So you need to send out your current guests and wonder who you forgot to invite. But when the job is done right, the solution is obvious, like the elephant in the room. It was already perceived by diverse physicists around the birth of quantum mechanics. One of the first witnesses was Eddington in his 1928 book, commented here by Richard Cohn Henry. Another one was the great mathematician John von Neumann. He was not very explicit on the metaphysics, but he crucially worked on clarifying the physics. In particular, he discovered the concept of density operator, needed to express the collapse dynamics and the quantum definition of entropy. But he unfortunately died of cancer at 53, leaving the task of defending his view on the shoulders of his friend Eugene Wigner. Then Wigner got confused on some details, but von Neumann was no more there to correct him. You know, even clever people may get confused on something, but science needs clarity. What doesn't look perfectly clear may seem worthless. Since Wigner failed his Cinderella checking, he finally abandoned his position. This has been seen as signing the final death of this interpretation. That is why it was not considered worth including in the list of interpretations in the poll I told you, nor in the last one from 2016, unlike the transactional interpretation, which proudly stands as the fourth physicalist option in the list. You see, all four physicalist interpretations together got 15 votes, that is 10%. The rest of options stay kind of suspended in the void for their view of physical reality. But another question in the same survey offers the option: the observer plays a distinguished physical role. It got 34 votes, more than twice all votes for any specific physicalist interpretation. So, what happened to Wigner? He noticed that physics cannot articulate the coexistence of multiple observers. He unfortunately missed cosmic idealism as a solution to this problem by lack of familiarity with spirituality. He was also troubled by a pioneer article on quantum decoherence showing difficulties with the definition of quantum states as vectors in Hilbert spaces. Indeed, it is confusing, but that just means it was a bad idea, while the use of density operators as quantum states makes the understanding of decoherence so much clearer. For more clarification, many more details can be found in my site, especially in this article. Now, in reply to the famous challenge, whether to keep or change the known laws of physics, just let the Red Queen answer this for you. We need a collapse dynamics running away from the law of unitary dynamics, just to account for known facts. And if you wish to get a law for it, you need to run twice as fast as you can. So you can't. Again, what is the core theory supposed to mean? The scientific consensus favors the Copenhagen interpretation, that is, our best expression of known facts, accepting the collapse dynamics aside the unitary dynamics. It only lacks metaphysical definiteness. But all physicalist attempts to fill this gap need to change the core theory in a way or another, and have a hopeless job at that. In particular, objective collapse theories have troubles trying to fit energy conservation, which is needed to keep mathematical consistency in general relativity. The von Neumann interpretation resolves this by taking the emerging condition of decoherence as a strict condition for collapse. It is the only metaphysically clear interpretation, agreeing with the scientific consensus, saying, yes, a collapse dynamics exists, and yes, it escapes any mathematical description. Indeed, The clearest definition of physicalism I can see is the view that conscious behavior follows some mathematically expressible law, whatever it may be. So, to claim that the collapse dynamics is the physical expression of consciousness escaping any mathematical law is not a trouble. It is just what it means to reject physicalism. I know this can be very bad news for all the people with some kind of divine faith that God must have designed the totality of what happens in the universe for this single purpose, always giving scientists the same kind of job, that of checking the conformity of the observed data with the predictions of some given mathematical law. I feel especially sorry for those who badly needed this kind of job while specializing in the quantum measurement problem. But, despite all my wishes, I cannot help them. Yes, sorry guys, the job is over. Even the job of giving the winning solution for spirituality can be found, done and recognized as such by that same article which claimed to challenge its possibility. Yes, indeed, we need a kind of dualism in the sense that the collapse dynamics works as a communication channel between an immaterial consciousness and physical reality. This article is not even suggesting the existence of any trouble with this solution. To conclude, let us clarify whether the Born rule needs a change. As I said, there is no other mathematical law to search for. The Born rule gives the physical probabilities for measurement outcomes, and there is no better mathematical law behind it. Yet it does not rule behavior because it makes no rigorous sense, only a fuzzy sense, to claim that a given evolution follows a given probabilistic law if its probability was non-zero. Such ill-defined claims are famously called not even wrong. Even if it made sense, it would remain metaphysically mysterious. What could bring nature to behave probabilistically at a fundamental level? This consideration seems to have some support among physicists. What else may it mean for 28 respondents of that poll to choose the randomness cannot be removed from any physical theory, rather than randomness is the fundamental concept of nature? Physicalism cannot even explain what it may mean for a universe featuring one possibility to become real, unlike a copy of the universe differing by a given measurement result. How any meaningful concept of existence may qualify a selection of finite mathematical structures, while all such structures equally exist in a pure mathematical sense. And there is no way for pure mathematical existence to match the structures of physics either. Just consider, what does it mean to say something is real while alternative possibilities aren't, and generally, that our universe is real, unlike an hypothetical other universe, for example with other values of universal constants? It means this universe is the one we are observing. This ontology is rooted in consciousness. For example, in 2015, physicists closely browsing the LHC data in desperate search for a job got the kind of signal they needed for publishing over 500 new articles. But it was just a statistical anomaly, something in the collapse dynamics, instead of a genuine discovery of something in the unitary dynamics as expected in their job. Did they need to break Born's rule for this? This is far from clear. At least, much more statistics and work around the fuzziness is needed to scientifically qualify such anomalies. Until then, it is rather a matter of taste. What? Do you think I'm joking? Well, maybe, but I'm not alone. Some famous French skeptics say almost the same, but without joke. The message is that it doesn't matter how much the statistical results from parapsychology successfully diverge from chance. It always remains a matter of taste and an honorable option for a master of scientific skepticism and critical thinking to remain a physicalist claiming that no physical probabilistic laws were ever broken. Isn't this amazing? So, now that the strategy to defeat physicalism is clear, Good luck with it and have fun.